20 years ago, we were blessed to have the tmnt 2003 show hit our screens, and ever since then, it has hit our hearts, and we have loved this show for so many different reasons. Now, with today being the 20th anniversary of the show, I felt as though I wanted to do something really special and important for the series, as this show has done so much for me. It made my childhood, it's practically made me, and I wanted to do something very special for the anniversary. But whatever I come up with, I don't feel as though it would have been enough to actually show my appreciation for the show. So I did something unique, and I brought back the cast to do a cast reunion in a way. So yeah. Okay, so for the people who we do have returning for this cast reunion, and I did try to get as many as I could, and the ones which we do have, we got Frederick B. Owens, who voiced Traximus and Leatherhead. We also have Mark Thompson, who did Casey Jones, Serling, and more or less half the characters on the show.
Hey, how are you?
Fine, thank you.
We got David Moo, who plays Faraji in the TMNT show.
Hey, I'm David Moo. I'm a voice actor, among other things.
We got Terrence Archie, who plays Silver Sentry, as well as Raptor. We have Brian Millard, who plays two of the Foot Mystics, as well as the Ishiwashi Gungeon.
How are you? Good to see you.
Fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. It's a beautiful sunny day here in Southern California.
We have Clay Adams, who voiced Cody in Fast Food, as well as Donatello in the Tales Forever movie.
Hey, thanks for having me.
We have Megan Solidhead, who voiced Abigail Finn, who was the Monster Hunter, and you might know her more specifically as Nurse Joy from Pokemon.
Yeah, hi, I'm Megan. You might know me as the voice of Nurse Joy in Pokemon. My Valentine in Yu-Gi-Oh! And what else? A lot of fun characters that I have been privileged to play over the years. And I am happy to be here today, or this evening, or whenever you're watching.
We have Oliver Wyman, who did the voice of Fugitoid, General Blank, and Gyoji.
For those of you, I can't imagine many people know who I am unless you really pay attention as Teddy does. I'm a voice actor. My name is Oliver Wyman. I often perform under the name Pete Zarustica, which is a play on words, actually. There's a dish called Pizza Rustica, which is very delicious. But I'm a voice actor. I have been for coming up on 30 years now, I think. I've done a lot of animation, a lot of anime. I've done a lot of 4-kid shows. These days, I mostly do audiobooks. I'm an audiobook narrator, and that's most of what I do, although I do show up in cartoons and commercials every now and then. You probably don't know, Teddy, who the Honey Nut Cheerios bee is. He's the mascot for Honey Nut Cheerios, which is a cereal we have here in the States. You may have it in the UK, but you probably don't have the bee. Anyway.
I was the voice of the bee, so I did that for a while, and that was kind of fun.
And let's see. I'm probably best known for being the voice of Aster Phoenix on Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, and one of my my personal favorite roles that I've played would be the Fugitoid, and of course Professor Honeycutt on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And as a matter of fact, I watched one of the Turtles in Space episodes with my son the other day because he hadn't seen them before, so I wanted to show that to him. So, yeah, that's who I am. And thank you for having me on your show, Teddy. I appreciate that.
We have Jonathan Todd Ross, who did the voice of Cousin Sid.
Well, I'm Jonathan Todd Ross, and, and I think I'm here to talk about some voiceover stuff. I'm primarily known for animation voiceover from some time ago, and now I mostly do audiobooks, but occasionally, animated production as well. So that's me.
We also do have two other surprises for this cast reunion. We also have Chuck Patton, who is the actual director for the first 2 seasons of the show.
How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing good. And yeah, also next up, we also have Jason Scott Jones, who did the storyboards for the episode Hunt on the Run.
Thank you for having me on, Liz.
Okay, so also the best question to really start this whole thing off is, how did you find out about the TV show?
How did I get on the TV show? That is interesting. I'm going to try to keep my answers short because I can tell you a long stories. Honestly, when Turtles went off the air, I think it was a good 10 years before it was decided to bring it back. And then it was how they wanted to bring it back. Both Eastman and Laird were not together on the idea of it. I believe that at that time, Laird and Eastman made a deal where Eastman would back away from the property and Laird would take control of it. And I don't understand. I can't explain all of it. It's been a long, long time. But when Peter was now the sole controlling force on Turtles, the first thing he wanted to do was to make it closer to the comic books. And that really made a big difference. Everyone who were after the property, everyone loved Turtles. Everybody wanted Turtles. Turtles made a lot of money. But here was a different idea of, ooh, let's make it more edgy like the comic book. By that time, the live action movie had been out. And I thought, and now I was a big fan of the live action movie. I thought that was closer to how I saw the Turtles. It was closer to the comic book. So when the people who were involved with the production, and again, I won't go into the long story about who was in production with it, but it went through a couple of different hands before the people who called me eventually became the studio. The first thing they told me was that when they called me up was, we want this to be closer to the comic book. We want this to be darker, not so dark, but edgier, a little different. And I was like, oh, now I'm interested. This is good. And because I had done Spawn at the time, they thought, yes, you would understand edgy. And so that's how I was called on the show.
Oh, so I did a lot of animation work at a company called 4Kids Entertainment, and they did Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! And a bunch of other shows. And I got cast in Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! And then when auditions came, I happened to be on the list of actors that they were they had gotten to know from some of the other cartoons. So I was lucky enough to kind of get an audition that way. And it was really cool.
Yeah, about you're talking about Fast Forward?
Yes.
Yeah, so so my agent contacted me, and they had an opening. They were actually recasting the role of Cody Jones, and voice acting is really tough to break into, and so they tend to sort of see the same people over and over again. That's why you see a lot of the same voices appearing over and over again at the same shows. And I guess the production company had seen everybody that they knew already. And it was a very rare thing that they would open this up to auditions. But they did. They opened it up. They put out a casting call, and my agent contacted me and said, hey, you know, they need somebody who can sound really young. And I guess I have a young sounding voice, or at least the ability to put it on. And so I went in and I clicked with the casting director, and really sort of felt like this was kind of in my wheelhouse. And I just I did the audition and kind of had fun. And then I don't think it was that much longer after that I got the gig. So I came in, it was about halfway during the season. I had to go back and re-record all the other stuff. But don't cry for the other guy, because I think he gets plenty of voice work. He's fine.
At the time, I had another friend. You might actually know him also. He's done voices on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles as well. His name is Mark Thompson.
Oh.
Mark. Yes, are you aware of Mark Thompson?
Yes, person plays Casey Jones.
Yes, he's played quite a few of those, and he's also the voice of many Star Wars audiobooks right now. Mark Thompson. So Mark Thompson introduced me to the casting people, and I went in for an audition, and it went well, and I kept it up. And I wasn't able to continue it after a couple of years because I had other projects to go on to. But I was introduced by a friend of mine, by Mark.
I had an agent in New York who just started getting me voiceover work. Even when I first started, I was 21 years old, but I had a very low voice, so I sounded older, so I could play older characters even at that age. So they just started sending me out for that type of roles. And there was a company in New York City called 4Kids TV that produced the Ninja Turtles show. And they also did a bunch of other shows of that era, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, One Piece, shows like that. And so once I started working on one of the shows, I started doing voices on all of them because they just kept drawing from the same pool of actors.
So I had been doing a lot of work with 4Kids at the time. They gave me all my initial voiceover jobs, and I had been doing not just Yu-Gi-Oh for them, but quite a number of other properties that they worked with. And it really was one of those things where, every week I would find out like what I was doing the week ahead, where it'd be like, okay, we need you for 8 hours for Yu-Gi-Oh, and we'd love to get you for an hour on Winx Club, and we might need you for another hour on One Piece. And then one week it was like, hey, do you want to be a part of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? And it was like, yes, of course I do. It hadn't been running for too long when I got to do my first side characters on that show, and so it was like a neat thing to join midstream.
In Turtles, I was lucky enough to be working at that studio already. So I was working on Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh and whatever else they happened to be producing at the time. So I had been hoping to work on Turtles, and I'd asked, hey guys, if you need anything, I would love to do it. So finally they came up with a role that I could do.
Oh, well, that's a good question. That's a really good question. It's a good story. I was working, like I said, I've been a voice actor for a long time, and I was working on a language program. When people learn to speak English, they listen to a recording of actors like myself saying things like, excuse me, can you tell me how to find the post office? Thank you very much. And I was working on one of those jobs with a wonderful young lady who I got along with very well. And her name was Veronica Taylor. You might know that name. She was the original Ash in Pokemon in the American dub at 4Kids. So when I met her and I found out what she was, and I was at the time I was playing Pokemon on my Game Boy. I was a fan. So I said, "You're on Pokemon? I want to be on Pokemon. Can you introduce me to them? I would love to audition for and see if I could get on one of those shows." And sure enough, I went to 4Kids and I auditioned for a show called Fighting Foodons, and I played a villain called Grill. And that was the first show I did with them. But not long after that, I was cast in Pokemon as
Zigzagoon.
And then it was probably right around the same time I auditioned for the Fugitoid at Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And I have to say that was, not only was I a fan, but the guys I worked with, the Turtles themselves, are friends. They're Wayne Grayson, Dan Green, Mike Sinter-Nicholas, and Sam Riegel, who I'm very jealous of, because you probably know Sam is doing very well as one of the cast members of Critical Role, and as a huge Dungeons and Dragons fan, I'm only incredibly jealous. But but yeah, working with those guys, and the best thing was, normally when we did cartoons, when we did dubs, as we were dubbing Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh and other shows like that, we were replacing the Japanese dialogue. So we worked by ourselves, and it's kind of like a video game, because you have to get the timing right to match the flaps, as they say. But when we did Turtles, when we did the TMNT show, they animated to our voices. So we recorded first, and I got to stay in the booth with Wayne and Dan. Oh no, it's Frank Frankson. That's right. Wayne and Frank and Sam and Mike. And they are some of the funniest people, especially Wayne Grayson. One of the funniest people you'll ever meet, and also a huge comic book fan. So he and I had a lot to talk about, but he kept us in stitches the whole time. So I knew about the show, but when I got to 4Kids and they said, "You want to audition for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles?" I said, "Are you kidding? Please, where do I go?" And I played a couple other roles on the Turtles, but that is that is one of the roles that I am proudest of.
I didn't find out about it. I was auditioned for it, so it found me. I didn't find it. I was called one day and told to come in for an audition, and so that's what I did. I went into 4Kids and auditioned and got that role.
Okay, so to start this cast reunion off, I'm going to go straight to Chuck Patton. I want to ask you a few questions about the show. Okay, so the first one is was it easy to direct?
Yes, I was going to direct all the episodes. That was the, well, there was a strange thing about it, because normally when you start a show, most shows are started because I was living in Los Angeles. That's where all the American animation was done at the time. You know, we would send out our animation to be done overseas, but the actual pre-production, as we call it, the creation of the show, was usually done in LA. Well, when I got called for Turtles, the big problem was that because Peter didn't like to fly, and he lived in the Midwest, and the company who had Turtles was in New York, that they decided to produce Turtles in New York. So that scared away a lot of people. They didn't want to leave. They didn't want to move from LA to New York. I had lived in New York to start my comic book career. So I wasn't even that tempted. So I took a while before I thought about it, and then I was convinced that this was a beautiful opportunity. I wanted to see Turtles brought back. I became more of a fan than I thought I would. I wanted to get that comic book feeling back into Turtles. I wanted it to feel like the original. And I thought, you know, it is great to be able to do Turtles in New York. And that's what convinced me, because, of course, Turtles are from New York. So that's what happened. I went to New York.
Huh. Okay, so did you watch the show at the time?
I saw it. Well, here's the thing. Once we started producing the show, once we started seeing the scripts, and I was working with the studio producer, Lloyd Goldfine, and Lloyd was a huge fan of all Turtles, and as well as a good comic book fan, and we gelled immediately. And we both were saying how we respect. There was a lot of the old TV series of respect. We did love the Utroms. There's something about the Utroms that are fun. The original cartoon Utroms. And we were saying how much, well, they're a little different than the Utroms in the comic book, but everybody loves the old Utroms. We knew we weren't going to get Rocksteady and Bebop. I forgot why, but we both decided, well, if we want to make Turtles a little edgier, Rocksteady and Bebop is a little more cartoonish. And so, again, taking it back to the comic book, we decided to stay with just the things you saw in the comic book at the time. And so Lloyd has seen more of the animated series than I had, the original animated series. So I would follow his lead, but I read a lot of the comic books. So that's why it was good that I wasn't, that was the main thing, was that once we decided that, we knew we only wanted to we didn't want it to look like anything of the old cartoons. So that's why we didn't really look at it. We were aware of it, but we didn't look at it.
So because you was directing the episodes and seeing the production on the whole show, did you actually get to see the episodes before they came out?
Oh, yeah, of course. Yes. Oh, yeah. The process, I mean, I saw everything, of course. I was being a director. Well, that was the thing. When I was brought there were so many artists who have tried out. They didn't have, the reason they brought me is that the directors that they had, they couldn't agree with. They didn't agree with what they wanted to do. They really didn't have the experience to put the show together. I had done a couple of shows, several shows by that time. So again, I did Spawn. I had done other shows, G.I. Joe. So I knew how to put a show together. And so that meant that as a director, I see everything. So I saw it from pieces of paper, drawn on tiny pieces of paper to big pieces of paper to color to film. And then, yes, so to answer your question, I saw everything.
Okay, so with the episodes, how long did they take to make?
Oh my God, that's a tough one. We were late. In other words, the show was already supposed to have been put into production. So when I came on, it was already behind schedule. So I think, and I'm really bad with these times. You're asking me something that was almost 20 years ago. So I'm gonna be a little off on this. I know that to do an episode, it takes normally 4 to 6 weeks to draw a storyboard.
Cool.
And from that, then the actual recordings usually takes a week. And we weren't able to do what most animation studios would like to do, which is record ahead. We actually recorded after we did the artwork. Off the scripts. So we had to make sure that what was said off the scripts could match the artwork. Because usually in animation, you record first, and then the animator, the artist, can listen to the recording and then draw appropriately. So there's a lot of adjusting. So by itself, that 4 to 6 weeks I talked about, that's just to begin the storyboard. But after you do the recording, then you have to go back into the storyboard, make sure that the recording hooks up. Then you create what we call an animatic. That takes, so let's put it this way. To do one episode, it takes about 16 weeks.
So with the show adapting so many TMNT comics, did you actually get to choose which comics you wanted to adapt for the show?
Well, it was predetermined by Peter, who's, again, even though I had a lot of influence on the show, it was all about Peter's vision of how he really wanted us to basically adapt the major story arcs from the comic books. One I was always aware of was City Under Siege, because that was a big turtle arc in the comic books. And we knew that we were going to build that into our series. So that was very big. We also knew that the Triceratodon story, I forgot the robot's name. Yes, Fugitoid. Yes, we knew Peter really wanted to get the Fugitoid. I loved the Shredder. There was something about the Shredder, and knowing that he was a Utrom, that was interesting to me. But the Fugitoid story I wasn't so sure about, but that pulled it off. We knew we were going to make that later down the series. So to answer your question, we followed the comic books as close as possible. And Peter and Lloyd would get together and they would map out how they wanted it, and then Lloyd would write it, and then I would look over it and say what worked, what didn't work, and then we would draw it.
So because you was able to actually help create the episodes, was there any episodes that got cut from production?
Oh, well, I knew there was one coming up towards the end of my time with them. We were always thinking ahead. It's not like we're doing these series at the same time that they're coming out. You have to think ahead. And so we already had figured out the first season and even the second season. And so by the time of the Fugitoid came up, there was talk of this time travel thing they wanted to do. Oh, actually, no, I take that back. Yeah, that was coming up, but there was also a Christmas show. And I always felt that Christmas shows are like, what's the word? Besides just cliche, I think, we all want Christmas stories to be happy and very Christmassy and spiritual. And I'm thinking, well, it's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. How can we do that? So I didn't want it to come off corny. I want it to feel authentic. If it's really going to be Turtle Christmas, it's got to really reflect not only Christmas, but what the Turtles were about. So I always felt like, well, let's not do any story. Let's not just make some story up. And I know they were having a problem trying to do that. Honestly, by the time that came up, I had decided my time on Turtles was over. And so I went, great, I don't have to deal with it. But I understood that story took a while. Once I left and the new director came on, they had a little trouble doing it. And also they were trying to push this time travel story. And I think that and the Christmas story actually got backed up some episodes. They kind of got to a point, I think they did the time travel thing later. But the Christmas story actually got delayed for another year or so. But I was off the show by then.
Okay, so this show got very dark at some very specific times. Did you actually run into any censorship issues?
Yes, we did. Not a lot, but we had a lot of, we had to always, I mean, we knew that we couldn't kill, but the action. Again, we had to talk to them and explain that, well, we're not a network show anymore. We're really syndicated. So we weren't really dealing with network because we were the network, actually. The studio that brought me there had started their own network called the Foxbox. So they were 4Kids. So they were putting it on their own network. However, we had to abide by what they call standards and practices. And standards and practices were the censors. That's what they are. They're officially known as standards and practices, but they're known by everybody else as the censors. And they're the ones that tell you, oh, you can't do that. Oh, you can't show blood. Oh, you can't have too much action, or, oh, that was too brutal. And even on the title sequence, when we did the big opening, which I was really happy to do because, again, it was an homage to the original series, but it was also showing you that, oh, we're a lot different. We're a lot edgier. And there was a scene where we had Raphael on the motorcycle jumping over rooftops. And the censors are like, oh, they got to wear a helmet. And we're, wait a minute, they're ninjas. Why does he have to wear a helmet? Well, he's on a motorcycle. It goes, okay, I'll do this. Let's be fair. Whenever they're on the motorcycle, they'll have to wear a helmet because there was a helmet law in New York as well as in California. So that's all right. When the turtles are wearing a helmet, when they're jumping on the rooftops by themselves, no helmets. And they went, okay. So they agreed. Because we explained if it's super heroic, something that a kid couldn't do, then we can get away with it. If it's something a kid could do, then we had to explain by, okay, he's got to wear a helmet. He's got to wear, Michelangelo at one time was going to go scuba diving. And we had to make sure he had this huge mask. But I said, no, I don't want just a scuba mask. It has to be something Michelangelo would build. It'll have a propeller or have all these lights. It'll be, it's got to be bigger than life because it's Michelangelo, not Michelangelo, it's Donatello. Donatello's doing this, so it's got to be superhuman. So it makes sense. And then also the toy guys loved it. Toy guys were very, 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 very supportive. So everything we drew, they got to make into toys. So the bigger and crazier, the better. So.
Now this show has some really interesting designs for certain characters. Did you help with the character designs?
Absolutely. Well, put it this way. I picked the artists. I would sketch out certain things, but you try to find people. Well, the directors can't draw everything. We shouldn't draw everything. When you're the director, your job is to do what they say, direct. So you try to find people who has that talent that you have or better than you, and you get them to do it. So I supervise in the sense that I would sit down with my artists and we would talk about design or talk about a character. And then either I would sketch it out or I let them sketch it out. If they have, I always believe who has the strongest vision would draw it. So if I came in, like the only time the two characters that I had a strong hand in drawing were and I think I see them on the back wall on your shelf. Hun? Maybe that's not him. That's not Hun, is it?
No, that's Casey Jones.
Oh, Casey Jones. Okay. Oh, well, I did have an influence on Casey Jones too. So every character I have influence on. I mean, once we got to the Turtles, which when we were trying to do the design, I didn't want to have them look exactly like what the comic books, because I felt that it wasn't strong enough. I thought, honestly, as much as it was Peter's style, I didn't think it would be as, again, strong with this new vision. But what I did thought what we should follow was the movie. I really like the movie style. And so our Turtles, which I see on your I don't know if that's a refrigerator behind you, but I see is it?
Yeah.
Okay, so that beautiful drawing that looks like Donatello.
Yes, I do have all 4 Turtles in there.
Oh, you do? Awesome. You are a serious fan, by the way. This is a pleasure talking to you.
Talking to you too.
When we were doing the designs, I kept leaning at the movie because I really love the movies. I love the big muscles. I draw big muscles. So that's why the Peter version, the Eastman and Laird version, as much as they were the quintessential turtles, but for the stories we wanted, I wanted something closer to the movies. So I did the original sketches myself and my lead artist, who I always loved. I loved his work. Unfortunately, he couldn't continue, so we got another lead artist who became a really good friend of mine. He's the son of an old friend of mine, and he took to it beautifully. And the more he drew, the less I had to draw, because he started feeling more and more of the style, and I went, okay, you take it. But from props to vehicles, I either did the original sketching or I talked to the artist with it. And that's how we came up with the look of the show. I wouldn't say it was all me, but when it came down to Hun, at the time, we didn't know what we were going to call him. We just knew we wanted a big, giant, like an American sumo guy. And we know we wanted him to be, he was like the Purple Dragons. He was going to represent the Purple Dragons, as well as be Shredder's right-hand man. And I wanted him to be different. I didn't want him to be Japanese. I wanted him to reflect New York. And so that's why he was a Purple Dragon. And we kept drawing it. And I liked the big, I wanted like an intelligent Hulk, not a big, dumb Hulk. Scarier guys when they're big and have muscles. That's what I thought, you know. And so we kept drawing, and we kept trying to think of names. We went from Dynamo to Blockhead and all these other names. Didn't work. And I remember I gave him this crew cut with a ponytail to show part it's like he was not a great student. He always relied on his strength. So he was like a sumo, but he looked like, and I went, a Hun. And I remember Lloyd and I going, that's different. I don't think it's a good name, but that's different, because Hun were like, they were like Vikings. They were like barbarian warriors who almost conquered the world. The Germans' army in World War I were called Huns. So that stuck with us, and it stuck with us. And every time we came up with 25 different names, and nobody liked them. Peter didn't like them. Playmates didn't like them. But all of a sudden, everybody saw Hun, and it stuck for a while. We just called it, until finally it just went, God, it's Hun. That's his name. He's Hun. So I created Hun from scratch. I did him a little drawing about that big, and it got bigger, and then that's Hun. The other guy I did was the Garbage Man. In fact, I came up with the Garbage Man story. I wanted someone like, I was always a big fan of Doctor Who. And I'm a huge fan of Doctor Who. And of course, if you like Doctor Who, you gotta like his nemesis, the Daleks. So I wanted someone like that. I wanted someone like Davros. And we didn't want to make him Davros. Again, it's New York. And one thing, when you're living in New York, you see a lot of garbage. And the garbage trucks are almost kind of ominous on how they pull up behind you to pick up garbage. And sometimes you don't even see people, you just see garbage. And I thought, what if that was someone inside there who controlled the truck, and he grabbed people instead of garbage? And that's when we came with the story and the look of the Garbage Man. And that was from me. Everything else came from the Turtle franchise.
Okay, so I'll also ask Jason a few questions now. Okay, so because you did the boards or storyboards for that fight scene, did you do any other storyboards for the episode?
No. So what they gave me a script, because again, they were like, hey, could you do a sample? And so they gave me about, I don't remember exactly, it was like somewhere around 5 pages of script. And it was specifically the sequence on the train. After the turtles catch up to the train, and Katana's already imprisoned, and Bishop's on there, and the whole fight sequence happens. It was that sequence. So that's why I had to do the research. I had to do the research to figure out who the characters were. And what I did was, scripts tend to be very broad, very open to interpretation. I don't know if that's for speed or for ease of the illustrator or both, but it was basically, they're on a train, Katana's imprisoned, there's like an energy field around her, Bishop is fighting with the turtles, and the other character whose name escapes me. Who is the other character?
Hun.
Hun. Yeah, so Hun is having this fight. He's already got it knocked off the train. Now it's Bishop and Katana involved with the turtles, and it's all about that dynamic. Plus the train has the hole in it, and it's like running at top speed. That was the sequence I got.
So with this scene, because you was drawing it, was it quite hard to imagine the scene?
Like I said, it was very, very broad. So what I did was and it was very broad, and it takes place in like the last third of the episode. So what I imagined was, okay, the train's already running because Katana's already on it, and the turtles are going to get introduced to it. So let's just join the story and process. And that's kind of what I thought about it. Like I was like, okay, they're on top of the train. I've got to show that they have enough clearance to be on the top, but in the tunnel. Then I have to have them flip, and all of the action has to lead into a certain direction where Katana gets free and Bishop escapes and all these things. So I just started plotting it out. And before I started plotting it out, I had never really drawn the Turtles. Like I was a big American comic book fan, but I didn't draw the Turtles. So one of the first things I did was go online and I Googled to see what the stylistic difference was between the 90s Turtles and the 2000s Turtles. And then I started drawing one of them, and just like drew probably like 3 versions of like a turtle, because essentially they're not very different except for their color and their badge and their weapon. So once I had drawn the turtles a few times, I was like, yeah, I could do this. I can knock this out. And then I got into plotting out the storyboards. And what I wanted to do was bring them very finished boards. Sometimes storyboards are sketchy, but I wanted them to be like, you could ink them and they could be like a comic. And that's what I drew.
Now, with these storyboards, you had to work off from the script. Did you find the script confusing?
No, it was very straightforward. It was very clear. And script formats, you've probably seen some. Typically, there's a headline that gives you a description of the setting. And then there's usually like another line or two that gives you the situation. So that was clear. They were on the train has a hole in it. They were speeding through. Katana's captured. Bishop is single-handedly fending off the turtles. And so the script was very clear. The dialogue was in there. But what was open was like, if it said that Bishop fought the turtle, it didn't say that he did a backflip and did whatever. It said that, he kicked the turtle. And I would have to figure out, well, what's the mechanics of that? And so I did that type of stuff.
So with the storyboards, did you actually have to follow the tmnt 2003 art style, or did you draw it in your own art style?
You have to go with the art style of the animation. You have to, of the program. And so I had done some different type of work at Nickelodeon. It wasn't storyboarding, it was production design. And while I was at Nickelodeon, I got a chance to see the character designs and the guidebook for SpongeBob and a couple other characters. And it shows very specifically how they're drawn so that anyone who comes on to a project, like that's an animated project, can be consistent. The main thing in animation is that it has to be consistent. In comic books, depending on who's the editor of the comic and how popular the character is, there's sometimes some leeway. Sometimes you could get onto, let me think of a character who's not extremely popular. Jubilee. You could draw Jubilee, and you might draw her exactly like Jim Lee or Madureira or whoever, or as your own style. But in animation, you have to be exactly the same as the style guides. And so that's why I was Googling reference and finding that stuff.
Okay, so for the actors, I would like to ask a few questions for you now. Did you actually watch the previous versions of the TMNT?
Honestly, I had never seen it before. I was doing a series with Fox at that time, and one of the directors came into the room, and he liked my voice, and he said they were doing, he had a character that he was interested in my reading for at the time, which was Leatherhead. Yeah. And he wanted to know if I'd come in and read for it, and I was like, well, sure. And so my kids knew all about it. I knew about it, but I had never seen one episode of it, not one. So I became a huge fan the day that I did it. That's when I became a fan.
Yes. Yeah, because the only previous one before ours was the 80s. Is that right?
Yes, and the movie.
And the movie. Yes. Okay, so yeah, I was a fan of both of those. There's just been so many since then that I lose track now. But but I was a big fan of the original cartoon and the movies as well. And it was a big deal for me to audition for this, and I was really psyched when I got it.
Yeah, It had been a while. By the time I was doing fast forward, it had been a while since I had seen the cartoon. But I remember being more of like a comic book guy at the time, that I was definitely more familiar with the comic book incarnation of the Turtles rather than the cartoon. But I had definitely seen the cartoon.
Yeah, I have seen a few versions, including the new cartoon version. I saw a couple of the movies, and I saw what they tried to do with a couple of the movies. The first one was a bit more kid friendly, I think, and I think it got a little bit darker on the second one. But yeah, I've seen quite a few of them.
I watched a version of it when I was younger. So when I was in kind of middle school, 7th, 8th grade, that sort of thing. But then I kind of forgot about it until I became an actor, and they were doing this new version of the show. So I wasn't a huge diehard fan, but I was familiar with the show and excited to be a part of the new version of it. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, I did. And in a limited way, Turtles were also I would say Turtles were also the first comic book that I really got into. I was not extensively into comic books. I was very much into a lot of the comic book properties out in the world, but like the comic books themselves, I know I was into like those they were like a collection of 4 graphic novels that, were a collection of like those original stories. And I was deeply into those. So it was really like mind blowing to then be asked to be part of, I guess you would call it a reboot of Turtles down the road. Cause I was, as a kid, super into those original cartoons, watched it constantly, knew every word to the theme song, and to one day then be on the show was like really cool in a way that, like, to be honest, it was cooler than being on some other shows that like were really neat, but like I didn't have any relationship to them beforehand, and I definitely did with Turtles.
I did not. I knew nothing about Turtles when I came in, except that I was lucky to be in a room with a lot of my friends, and it was actually the first, my first experience with original animation, where I got to do the original version of the script instead of dubbing, where the cartoons already existed in a different language, and I had to match the cartoons. I just got to act. I get to act with dubbing too, but like, I just got to be as free as I wanted to be. And then the art was done to match my flap instead of me matching someone else's flap. And for anyone who doesn't know, flap is the character's mouth moving up and down.
I was not a big fan. It really seemed like more of a kid show. I think I am a big fan I've been a fan of the comics. I was working in a comic book store when the first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle comic came out. And as I told my son yesterday, at that time, it became so popular that they had all of these imitators. There was even a comic book called Adolescent Radioactive Black Belt Hamsters. But the thing that really, like I said, when the first show came out, they had a cereal. It was marketed for kids. The toys took off. I still have my Fugitoid in the box. Someday I'll put that on eBay and sell it for $10. But I'm a big fan, like I said, and the fact that I was picked when they cast the show that I worked on at 4Kids, Peter Laird, who is one of the creators, as you know, his first character was the Fugitoid. And so he has a great love for the Fugitoid. And he made sure that when they cast the person who played the Fugitoid on that show, that he got to pick the voice. And he picked me. And the fact that Peter Laird picked me, and I'm a big comic book fan. Do you know of a store called Forbidden Planet, Teddy?
Yeah, I've been there a few times.
There's one in New York City, and I used to run the toy department there, and I worked in the book department and the comic department. In fact, I have I'll have to put them up on my YouTube channel. I have interviews that I did in 30 years ago in 1989. But yeah, just, I am, as you can see, I got my Superman shirt on, and this is my Dungeons and Dragons hoodie. So yeah, as it says on my Instagram bio, I'm an extreme nerd.
Yeah, I've seen some of those cartoons as well as some parts of some of the movies. Yeah, so yeah, I saw some of the television and film stuff before.
Okay, so what's the auditioning process like?
It was pretty simple. They just gave me something to read. Basically, it was an introduction. He says, "Hi, I'm Leatherhead.
Allow me to introduce myself. I am Leatherhead."
So it was just a, basic introduction thing of him describing himself or how he came about. And that was it. They wanted him to sound very, which is funny, very intelligent. Because he was using these bigger than life words, which was really funny also because they had a person the entire time I was there who would pronounce words for me because a lot of the words I was not familiar with and they didn't want to continuously have me to say the words and then have to correct me. So they had a person that was there the entire time to do all of that.
Oh, wow. It's been a while ago. I think they just had us read sides and we kind of just read the different characters. And I think they were trying to stay pretty close to what had come before. So there were some easy reference points to kind of look at. And we read it and we had some callbacks and I can't remember if we got to read together or not. I don't think I did because I feel like I met everybody who was in it on the first day of recording. But the biggest thing I remember is just walking down the street and getting a phone call and Carol, one of the producers, was letting me know that I got cast as Casey Jones. And I was like, no way, really? I was like really excited. It was because I grew up watching that cartoon. So I was more emotionally connected to Ninja Turtles than Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! Because I didn't know those properties growing up. So it was fun to be on a cartoon that was on television for those shows. But Ninja Turtles was like the first one I got where this is something I grew up with that I watched as a kid. So to get cast in that was a really, really big deal for me.
Well, what I recall is you go into a little booth and it really is pretty straightforward. They ask what your take on the character is, and they have you have a go at it for a couple of times, and then you may make a couple of adjustments. But really, for me, what I brought was just myself. I decided to imagine what I would be like as a superhero. And if I had all the given circumstances and the powers of a superhero guy, what would I do? How would I sound? And so it really kind of fell pretty naturally because it wasn't so much about a character. It was about what I would do if I was just in that situation.
It was pretty quick, as I recall. I mean, these days it's a lot more. It's the same process. You basically are given a script, and you have to try to come up with a voice for the character that you think matches, and you send in the audition. Before COVID, we would go to an actual studio a lot of the times and record an audition. But in recent years, and certainly in the last 8 months, everybody has home studios, and so we just record our auditions at home. And then you hope that the producers like you and pick you, and then they bring you in and you do the voice. And it was similar to that back then, although, like I said, I didn't have a home studio. I probably went to a studio and auditioned. And it's funny, I was so young then, I was 21 or 22, that it didn't even register to me that like, oh, I got the job, cool. Like, it was just the next thing that I was doing. Now, 20 years later, I'm like, God, I should have been more excited and appreciative that I got it, because then it led to, like I said, all those other shows. So it was a great opportunity at the time, but for me, it was just like the next thing that came along. It was a commercial or a TV show I was auditioning for, you know? So.
Well, if my memory serves, I actually didn't audition for Turtles. And that was because often the way 4Kids worked, particularly for characters who had smaller arcs, usually what they would do is you would just like you would go in the room and record, and they would say, can you do like this kind of voice? And they'd say like, oh, okay, great. If you had a bigger part on any of their shows, it was like a lengthier audition process. Usually, you know, at the beginning of a show, like when a show was, they were preparing the first episode and they were casting, frequently it was the people they were casting from were people who had already been working on 4Kids properties, and you would pretty much read for everybody. You would go in there and you would, you know, there would be a little character description and you would, you know, give it your own flavor. And you might do that for pretty much all the characters on the show. And then you would find out a few weeks later, you know, who they chose. And, you know, one thing that I always found really interesting about that is a lot of people, it's not, I don't know the person who had the power to say, yeah, that person gets the job, or no, they don't. Because like you would audition and the person casting you is usually a director that you work with a lot, or a producer. And like, they would be like, okay, we'll see what they say. And like, you would never really find out who they was. I'm sure they existed. But it would keep going, you know, up until someone somewhere made a final decision, and then you would get the job or not, as was frequently the case.
I didn't have to audition for that. They knew me well enough that they knew I could jump in. Probably, this was a long time ago, but you know, they would pay us by the hour. And so if I was already working on another show, they could throw me into something else that was going on. You know, as I'm saying that, that might not have been true for Turtles. They might have had something else going on. But like I said, I was around. They tried to use people who were already working for them at the studio. And so I was lucky enough just to get thrown in without auditioning. At that moment, they were like, can you do an Australian accent? Which for an American is really hard. We often mix it up with proper English accent or Cockney accent. Like, so my Australian started off kind of Australian, ended up a little bit Cockney, and probably with all my accents, I end up Russian. So I wouldn't be surprised if she sounded a little Russian. But that's one I would have prepared for if they had told me in advance. But nope. They're like, get in there. Hey, do you do Australian? Okay, sure. I'll try.
Well, it's pretty straight up and down, really. They give you a script and they'll give you a little bit of direction, and they'll have you read a few lines, and then they'll say, okay, try it again, this time with a younger voice, or this time with a little more, a little less serious. You know, depending on what they're looking for. But the thing is, generally in voiceovers, it's the quality of the voice that they're looking for. So they get a pretty good idea right off the bat. You know, we're all of us, all professional voice actors can, you know, we can act. So it's really the quality of the character voice that they're listening for. And I have been very, very lucky that's, you know, people, like I said, I was the Honey Nut Cheerios bee, which was kind of, for me, that was a really big deal because he's a really visible character. Even people who don't watch cartoons see him.
But the fact that they picked my voice because they thought that was cool,
you know, that's a voice I sit and do with my kids all the time. So that made me very, very happy. But the thing is, you don't know what necessarily what they're looking for, and a lot of times the casting directors don't know what they're looking for until they hear it. So a lot of times it's just luck of the draw, but it's pretty straight up and down. With some parts, for Turtles and Yu-Gi-Oh, like I said, we just come in and read a few lines and they'll give us some direction, have us read it a few times. But when I auditioned for the Honey Nut Cheerios bee, that took a while. They had me record in my studio at home, and then they had me come in to record to match the animatics that they had already recorded, that they'd already filmed. And that, because they put a lot of effort into choosing the right voice for a big mascot like the Honey Nut Cheerios bee, that takes a while. But with the cartoons, they know pretty quickly.
Well, it depends on the show and what kind of work it is, but generally you go in and sometimes there's always a description, and there's always some what we call sides, which are a little bit of dialogue. Sometimes the description comes with a picture of the character. Sometimes there's actual video where you can see maybe the original material, if it's in Japanese or whatever. In this particular case, for TMNT, of course, that was all original animation, so there was no video. It was all being animated to our voices. So yeah, I received a character description. I can't remember now, this is so long ago, whether or not there was a picture. But yeah, sort of just a general idea of what the character is like, what he looks like, where he's from, what his personality is like, and then you give it a shot. And they kind of like this interview, you lay down your name and you read the side, and then they say thank you very much, and then you either receive a phone call or you don't.
So was it quite hard to get into the characters he was playing?
No, not at all. I walked into the room in character. Leatherhead is basically who I am. I just had to slow down my speech for a little bit because, whenever I get a role, but I have to speak really, really fast. And I'm sure I shared it with you before, I do stutter. So that role was the challenging one for me because it challenged me to slow down my speech, which was helpful to me.
No, not really, because it was it just kind of felt fun, and it was it's kind of I'm originally from New York, and so I kind of have that accent in my wheelhouse. So so yeah, it wasn't too difficult. It was pretty fun.
It wasn't all that hard. What was really tough about it is that they wanted somebody who sounded really young. And I remember going in for the first table read, which is kind of like a rehearsal where you're sitting around the table. And we were sitting there, it was me and the other turtles. And we were sitting around the table and we did the read of the first episode I was going to do. And I just remember the director coming up to me and being like, we really need you to sound young, like really go for that. So I think I kind of had that in my head that I was just, really trying to sound young. Beyond that, what was tough about it is that even though we had rehearsed around the table, you weren't recording with other people. You were in a booth all by yourself, saying the lines. And for the most part, the episodes were not animated yet. So when I started, since I was a replacement, they were already halfway through the season, and I came in and I was recording, like, I think my first episode was probably like whatever the midpoint of the season was. I'm not even sure. Was it like 10 or 13 or something? And there's nothing for me to look at. I don't know what's going on screen. I don't know what I look like. Like, I don't know anything. And I just have these lines here, and there's no description of what's going on. The director's just kind of telling me like, okay, say these lines 3 times, 3 different ways. and then he'd have to be like, well, okay, that was good, but really what's happening is there are aliens coming down and there are explosions everywhere, and like you really got to call it out, and you're actually, when you're saying this thing, you're talking about the alien, and it's like, okay, well, all right, let me try that again then. Then after we finished recording all the new episodes, then we had to go back and replace all of the voices in the first half of the season. Or the Cody Jones voice in the first half of the season. So by that point, the animators had already animated. And so I was actually looking at what was going on screen, and I was a little more comfortable in the role, having done it for a while. So while it was kind of new to sort of be watching the TV and trying to talk and match the pace of the other guy, it was easier in a lot of ways because I could see what I was reacting to. I could see what was going on. And then we went back and did little fixes on some of the episodes that I had originally recorded. They either changed a line, or once it was animated, they wanted a different reading. And so I did that, but it wasn't nearly as extensive as when I went through and I literally just re-recorded all those earlier episodes. So I haven't actually sat down and watched the series, but I imagine like the voice of Cody Jones, might start off one way, and then by like midway through the season, it maybe sounds a little bit different, because that's actually my first episode.
No, I don't think it was that difficult, because it's all pretend. I think a lot of times when performers do voiceovers, or when they do a role on TV or film, a lot of people think they must have really did this, and they must have really did that for this role. They must have really worked hard. And true, I do work hard, but sometimes you come across a role that really just falls right into the pocket for you, and it falls out of your lips and out of your voice really, really easily. And that character is a character that really I've been playing since I was a kid. The superhero guy who comes to save the day. I think we all have those characters that we played when we were children, and we're all lucky if we get a chance to make some sort of living doing it. But really, I have to say, I can't say anything too complicated about it. I would just say that it was all in good fun, and it was pretend. It's just pretend, Yeah. So it wasn't that difficult at that time. I don't recall it being that difficult. Yeah.
A lot of times it is. Yeah. I mean, if there was a camera on me in my studio at night when I'm trying to figure out these auditions, you would see the Sisyphusian task of pushing the rock up the hill and having it fall back down, as I try to find the voices of some of these characters, and I'll record the whole voiceover, and I'll listen back and be like, that's just not right. And I'll go back and I'll do, like, I was doing something the other night. I can't tell you what it was, because they have signed confidentiality agreements, but they wanted him to have a British accent. But as you know, that doesn't mean something specific. That can mean 50 different accents, depending on where in the country you're from, or what your education is, and things like that. And so, I went through the whole thing with this kind of Bond villain, like, that's very good. I believe we'll kill you by the end of the day. That thing. And it didn't work. It didn't feel right. So I went back and I did it. I did a lot more kind of like, right, I think we've got this under control. All you got to do is, and that didn't work because he didn't seem refined enough. And so I swear I must have done it 100 times. I start at like 10 o'clock when my wife goes to bed, so she doesn't have to listen to me. And by 12:30, I had done it for 2.5 hours, and I still wasn't happy with it. So it is difficult sometimes because, when you used to audition in the studio, there'd be a casting director there. And the casting director would say, here's what the director likes, here's what he's looking for. And I'd do it, and they'd be like, that's good, but try it like this a little bit. And they'd give you direction, and you'd be like, oh, okay, cool. So if you didn't get it, you knew that it was just because the voice wasn't what they were looking for. But when you just get this audition emailed to you with no real notes, you just kind of have to figure it out for yourself and hope you get lucky and hit on the voice that the person who created the show or that's casting the show hears in their head. Like, yeah, that's what I imagine that character sounding like. That guy nailed it. So It is a challenge, but it's part of the fun of it, is trying to find a unique voice for every character.
No, it was by that time in my career as an audio, as a voiceover performer, there isn't really a lot of spare time around. Everything's it was fun and it could be loose, but like they would be booking you in essentially 15-minute increments, and that would save the studio time and money, and the director's time and money. It would save you time and money, where they would know exactly how much they needed you for. And so there wouldn't really be a lot of time for you to like sit there and like really do that work, which, isn't necessarily a bad thing. I know I come from, I had come from a theater background where, you might have plenty of time before the show started to get into character. But like once things were off and rolling, like, you'd go backstage, you would talk with someone and be like, okay, time to go back on. And you would take like a second to like center yourself, and you'd go back on stage. And I found it a lot like that, where you would have to, you'd go in there and you would find out what you were doing, and you'd flip through the script, and usually you wouldn't see the script until you got there. And you would just like take a minute and like get that voice. I think probably the most I did is like, I know we're largely, because we're talking Turtles mostly, like, you'd be like, okay, I'm Cousin Sid. All right, let's go. And like, then you would do it. And like, that would be getting into character. But there would be very limited time for, the extensive dramatic work that you might otherwise do, which essentially like that would be your homework. Figuring out who the character is and just being ready to like jump into their skin.
That one, not the character. Like I said, the accent was challenging, but that character, Monster Hunter, was easy. She was big and fun and loud and crazy. And it was very clear what her motive was. When I play a character that has a clear view of the world and a clear motive, a clear view of the world and clear object, what do they want? Then it's exceptionally easy to connect and find life for that character.
No, not really. I really enjoyed that session, or those two sessions. Yeah, no, I think it was fun. I don't think it was particularly difficult.
Did you audition for any other roles?
No, I don't think I did. No.
Yeah, I did. I think I auditioned for all the Turtles. I auditioned for probably Hun. I auditioned for Shredder. Almost all the male roles, I think they allowed us to try out for. So most of the ones I at least tried to get a crack at, and got beat up by the other guys.
No, just that one. That was the only one that they were looking for at the time. Like I said, they're very, it's a very kind of closed industry, and people like to work with people that they've already worked with. So they were just looking for this one role, this one time, and I just happened to get lucky.
Well, I think you mentioned Raptar, and honestly, there were some other characters that I've done just being called in by the office to just cover some roles. Honestly, I don't remember all of them. There were maybe three or four of them, and I would just use a different affectation on my voice, like Raptar might be something like this, or there was another kind of mutant creature guy who had a different type of voice. And it's fun playing with different types of voices, because it kind of changes your body a little bit. If you've ever put on a different voice, if you've ever imitated your uncle or someone at school or a teacher or something, it kind of changes your body a little bit. Your body gets a little bit more rigid or gets a little bit more loose depending on who who you're imitating. So some of the other guys like Raptar, and there was another one, maybe some guy with the rhinoceros head or something. I forget who these guys are. It's been so long. But yeah, I just know Raptar is one of them, and another creature guy with a rhinoceros head, I believe.
I honestly don't know. To be honest with you, like I said, that first audition, whatever it was, whatever role it was that got me on the show, was what then led to me doing all the other characters. You know, I do remember once or twice them being like, "Hey, can you give this a shot and try it?" And I would do it, and then they'd be, you know, you could see them through the glass in the studio being like, "I don't know, I think it's pretty good." All right, yeah, you got it. You got the job. You know, it was that quick, which isn't really the norm these days. But again, that studio, the way they did it, they just churned out shows. They were non-union, which means they weren't, you know, SAG-AFTRA jobs. It was just sort of like they paid by the hour. So if they had me for an hour and they could get me to do 3 or 4 different shows, they were happy to do it. You know, nowadays you have to get paid for each character that you do and each session that you do and things like that. But back then it was a free-for-all. So I did audition for a lot of them, but nothing stands out because it wasn't the normal protocol, you know?
I don't think so. Like I said, I think on Turtles, I actually don't recall auditioning at all. I certainly did on other shows, but I think on Turtles, they were just like, "Yeah, come, you know, are you free Wednesday morning?" That was the audition process for that, and you know, and at that point, I'd also been working with them for a long enough time where there was a degree of trust involved that I would be able to leave there having given them what they wanted to see or hear.
On Turtles, I don't remember. I actually think I did audition at one point for April. I think we were all given a chance to audition for that, but obviously I did not get that.
Yes, I auditioned. Well, that was, unfortunately, I came into the show, they had already cast all the Turtles. Otherwise, there was a possibility I could have been one of them. That would have been great. And I did audition for, I don't mean to sound like a braggart, but I think I got the parts that I auditioned for, and they were the Fugitoid, Mr. Go. There was a Mr. Touch and Mr. Go. I remember I did that with Mark Thompson. I think Mark Thompson was Mr. Touch and I was Mr. Go. Mark Thompson, by the way, who is a friend and one of their, you know, I get to work with some, I'm good at what I do, but I get to work with some really incredible people. Mark Thompson is one of the most talented people I've ever met in my entire life. And Sean Schemmel, another guy these are friends, and I can't say enough about how impressed I am with their work. So yeah, I've gotten to work with some really amazing people.
I don't remember, actually. I'm not sure. Oh, actually, yes. I think I did, actually. I think I may have auditioned for Shredder. In fact, I'm sure of it. I'm almost positive that I auditioned for Shredder, and that I got a call back for that, but that I didn't get the role.
So, did you have like a favorite episode from the show?
I don't know the episodes, but I do have a favorite one. It is the one that Leatherhead was introduced. Also, there is one where Traximus was part of this war games kind of thing, where they had this.
Oh yeah.
Yes, yeah, those two that I remember specifically because they wanted me to be in my best voice for both of them. And for Traximus, I had to go outside of my range because there was a lot of war stuff going on. So I had to do a lot of hollering and screaming and that kind of stuff. And that was different. I had never done that before. So, I mean, it was a challenge, just like anything else. But once you do it and you go, wow, that was pretty neat, you kind of impress yourself. that you can get it done, because at the end of the day, it's just you in a booth with a microphone. So there is no other ambiance for you to play to. There is no character that's actually in front of you. It's just you. And so when you have to play those things, especially when you have to interact with another character, it's really challenging because there's no one there to interact with.
Ooh, wow. I can't really think of one. No, I guess not. I do remember liking them all. I think it was cool when, this is awful that I don't know this, but what's the rabbit's name?
Oh, Yusuke Jimbo.
Usagi, yeah. When we met him, that was kind of fun and that was kind of cool.
Do I have a favorite episode? I don't. It's been years since I've seen it, so I don't really nothing really jumps out. I know there's one where there's this line like "be the water," you're learning how to be more flexible. Okay, I got it. Be the water. Be the water. And that episode really kind of stuck out. I think maybe because there was some kind of, moral there or something. That's one that's always really kind of stuck out in my head. So yeah, I'll say that one.
Let me think about that. I think, what's the guy's name with the, that swings the baseball bat? Kato? Is it Kato?
Casey Jones.
Yeah. Casey Jones. Casey Jones. When Casey Jones first came on the scene, I like his first introductory episode. I always like the introductory episodes that give you a background into the characters, and then the turtles have to adjust to meeting new superheroes. I always like the origin stories. But of course, I'm going to be a little bit biased. I love I actually do love when the Silver Century first came in, because before, when you look at the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and all of their adversaries, they don't really have a lot of superpowers, right? So when the Silver Century flew in, it was like, wow, I didn't know that he was a part of that world, that universe, that they actually have superheroes with true superpowers. And so when I first read about it before I even did the role, I was like, wow, this is, I didn't know that the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle universe expanded to include superpowers like that. So I'm going to be a little bit biased with that. So I'll say that that was a really fun episode to watch when the Silver Century first came on screen. But anytime a new character comes on, I love that type of stuff, those origin stories.
Oh gosh. I don't, unfortunately. Like I said, they all blend together in my mind, just because I think back as the experience. I don't think back of, oh, look at that. I remember that great episode I did. I remember my years at Ninja Turtles and all those shows as one kind of happy memory.
Do I have a favorite episode in the TV show?
Yeah.
I can't say that. That I know that I'm familiar enough with the TV show's sort of real episode by episode details in order to have a favorite episode now.
Okay, can you still do the voices?
Oh yeah, Casey's is he's like really heavily stereotypical New York, like, hey turtles, let's bust some purple dragons' heads open. Come on, Raph. So he's much more exaggerated and loud and angry than I am. So
yeah. I mean, it's probably been a while since I tried it, but I'm sure I could if I had a line. By the way, this little guy stays with me by my desk, so I always have him here for some inspiration.
Sure. Which ones? So that was Cousin Sid, and I'm trying to.
You also did a character called Nobby. It was like a race announcer.
Yeah, it was like Nobby was like that. It was like a mechanic. It was like a robot mechanic. It was like, I don't know, boss. It's been like almost 20 years since I've done this voice, but if I remember, that was kind of the voice that I was doing, but I might be wrong. It was a very long time ago. I always loved the idea of like like in a different dimension. There's racing going on, and there's like some robot who sounds like they're from like Brooklyn. Was always very funny to me, and the producers liked it, and that was how we ended up with Nobby Blow.
So would it be okay if you said a few lines from the show?
If I remember, all I remember is, "Give me the money, Casey. Come on, Casey." That's I remember just a lot of frustration with Casey. "Come on, Casey, I need it. Come on, Casey." I don't. If there's a specific line that you want to remind me of, I'm thrilled to.
Yeah, I have 2 quotes here from. Yeah. So the first one is Spot Marks the X.
It's what?
Spot Marks the X.
Oh, right. Thank you for my Spot Marks the X, Casey. Spot Marks the X. All right, give me the next one. Let's do it.
So next one is from the one episode, which is and what's shaking April?
What's shaking April?
Yeah.
What's shaking April? Oh, April. What's shaking April?
Wow, perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's fun. Like I said, it's fun. It's always, I love this guy. It's always fun to revisit him. So it's my pleasure.
Well, it's really made my childhood. Thank you so much.
Oh, can I still do voices from those? I'm not sure that I remember exactly what any of them sound like, but if I heard them, sure, of course, I could do. I imagine I could probably do some of them. Yeah.
Most of them, yeah. Someone asked me to do, what was it? Fate Stay Night, Caster from Fate Stay Night recently, and I blanked. I still would blank. I'd have to go watch her again. I can do Nurse Joy at the drop of a hat. Also, because I'm continuing to do her, I've had to remember her. And I can always do my Valentine. And I can even do Monster Hunter from Ninja Turtles. She's just loud. And maybe she turns Russian. I can't remember. But then other times I just forget and have to watch them again. I'm on Cameo where people can, it's odd and lovely. People can pay to have me record a message for them. And so someone asked for, am I Annie or Oakley? Annie from one of the Pokemon movies. And I had to go back and watch that because I couldn't remember exactly what she sounded like. I had an idea, but it came out funny. And so I watched that again, which was a total joy because I'd forgotten that I did it with Lisa Ortiz, who's one of my favorite people on the planet. And so that was pretty cool. And like, I probably couldn't do that now. Even though I just did it, it was something like that. She was very mysterious, almost like a spy. I guess I can do it. But again, I had to be reminded. So I do have to be reminded of characters from time to time.
Sure. Which voice?
So for Fugitoid, would it be okay if you said, "Oh dear"?
Oh dear. Well, I'm afraid.
The thing about the Fugitoid, I was telling my son this the other day. When I auditioned for him, they said, I said, what kind of voice are you looking for? And they said, basically C-3PO.
And I said, "Oh, C-3PO. Well, that's fine. I can do C-3PO. That's who I am, really. I'm a protocol droid."
And I started doing that voice, and I think they were like, okay, this is the guy. But Peter Laird picked me, as I said, and during one of the episodes, I don't know if you're a Star Wars fan. I am a big Star Wars fan, but when we did one of the shows, there was a line where the Fugitoid had to call these people and say, "I'm over here." So I just went, "Over here," and I just said it just like the way 3PO said it in the original Star Wars. And I think most of the people in the booth, they didn't catch it. But Wayne Grayson, I looked at him and he gave me that smile like, yeah, that's it. C3PO.
So yes, I will always be able to do C3, the Fugitoid, or Professor Honeycutt, whatever you prefer to call me.
So can I still do the other voices from the show, such as General Blank and Georgie?
General Blank, as I recall, he was a mean guy. He was one of these guys, real gravelly. Yeah, that's right. I forgot that I was because at one point I had to yell at myself. General Blank wanted the Fugitoid, and he was yelling at him on the camera. And
the Fugitoid, oh dear, well please don't hurt me. It's not my fault. I'm just a robot.
But yeah, I can definitely do that voice. He's kind of close to Glalie. That's one of the Pokemon I did.
I think he was a very soft-spoken character, something like this. I'm not entirely sure.
He was the judge of the combat.
But as I recall, he was a very staid character.
And you'll notice, and I should tell you, my wife is actually from the UK, and I am a bit of an Anglophile, if you know what that means. So I have a great love of English culture and English literature and art. And I love playing British characters. That's my favorite thing to do. Whenever I record a book, if I'm recording a fantasy novel, because in my mind, fantasy novels like Lord of the Rings, everybody speaks with a British accent, so you have to have British characters.
Okay, Clay Adam, I do have something in mind, and I would like you to say something. Would it be okay if you said a line from the show?
Yeah, sure. What do you got?
As a cult classic from Fast Forward, would it be okay if you said it's ninja time?
Sure. I got to think about what the voice is. Is he kind of way up here like this? Sort of kind of up here?
Close enough.
Close enough. All right. It's ninja time.
Our little Cody, all grown up.
Perfect.
How's that?
My childhood is now complete.
All right, good.
One final thing. Would it be okay if you did and said one phrases from Turtles?
One what?
And you said one of the phrases from Turtles.
One phrase?
Yeah.
Well, let's see. The only phrase I said over and over was Parker, get them now. Stop those turtles. See?
Perfect.
Dropped the Australian altogether, but thank you.
Perfect. That's really made my childhood.
Aw, that's so cool. You know what? I think my belated New Year's resolution is to work on an Australian accent. One day I'll get it.
Okay, Mark. So you did Casey Jones, right? And I feel as though it would be criminally insane of me not to ask if you could say Goongala for this very special occasion.
Yeah! Goongala!
Wow, that's really made my day.
Okay, so now for a cult classic TMNT question, which you more or less have to ask everyone. Who is your favourite turtle?
Oh, that's unfair. That's unfair, and actually, you caught me because I do have a favorite turtle. Leonardo.
Wow.
Why? You want to know why?
Yes.
Because when we designed the show, and again, not only influenced by the movie, but just turtle comics as well, Leonardo as the leader is supposed to be the ultimate ninja. More than just the ultimate ninja, he was a samurai. And again, what I really insisted to everybody was our turtles was going to be we're going to bring back the ninja, we're going to bring in the warriors. And so in truth, they were ninja warriors, because there are two different things. And Leo to me was the ultimate samurai, Bushido, and also being, in some ways, as a leader, he wasn't sure of himself because he's a teenager. And I thought he was the one, his dynamic with his brothers made each guy special. So him and Ralph reminded me, as I kept telling everyone too, was that the Turtles were brothers. We really wanted to emphasize that. They're all brothers, and all brothers have pairings. I have a lot of brothers, and I know one of my older brothers and I are like that, and then one of our other two younger brothers are like that, and we're constantly doing that. It was us two against them. So I love that Michelangelo and Donatello would be like that together, and Leo and Ralph, who weren't like that, but they always had each other's back. If one was hurt, the other one's there for them. And then after they would save each other and go, I love you, then they'd fight themselves. So I love that. And Leo, as wise as he was, would make mistakes, but he would be the one who teaches brothers how to fix it. So I related to him. I wasn't the oldest, but I was the middle brother. And so I really wanted that personality. I understood his personality. So I guess he was my favorite. My second favorite would be Raph, because he was so angry. He was like Wolverine. You know, we really wanted to make him more close to that. And also he was the warrior with the skill, but he didn't have, he was you know what Lone Wolf and Cub was like? Do you know what that is?
No, not really.
Do you know what the Baby Cart series is? It's a Japanese manga series, very famous. They made him in the movies. It's about a samurai and his son. And the son is young and he's in a baby cart. And the baby cart is almost like the Aston Martin. It has lots of weapons on it, and they take on ninjas and they take on bad.
Yeah.
Well, that's one of my favorite samurai series. So Ralph reminds me of the father of just a weapon. So Ralph would be my second favorite.
Donatello. Donatello's my favorite turtle because he was like the rational one. He's always the rational one. That was like the main reason. Like most of the depictions, they always make Raphael angry. Leonardo's, like every leader, like Cyclops, like Captain America, is kind of boring. So Leonardo is kind of like, whatever. Michelangelo, they usually make Michelangelo like the comic relief, but I love that Donatello's the smart one who's like trying to get out a good idea, and the other turtles are so busy getting knocked around that he's got to jump in the fight and stop his thought process. And then plus, I was absolutely a arcade Turtles game player, and I was all about sitting there for like 40 minutes destroying the entire game. And the best, no matter what anybody says, the best character is Donatello. He doesn't have as much hit points, but he's got a further reach than all of the rest of the Turtles. There it is, best turtle.
Well, what now?
As a turtle,
my favorite turtle?
Yes.
Donatello. I think that's the correct pronunciation, correct?
Yes.
Yes, he's the one. He is the one. And it's only because when we would record, sometimes he was always the first one there. And so I always got a chance to pick his brain, and he taught me quite a few things about the microphone that I didn't know and studio technique that I didn't know. You know, so that's the only reason why he really became my favorite, because he's the only one that took the time to help me out and work with me and to teach me the voice acting game. It was Donatello.
Okay.
Yes.
Ooh. I gotta go with Michelangelo. Like, he's just, you know, he's fun but cool, and I like kind of being the funny guy. So I think Michelangelo is probably my favorite.
My favorite turtle. Well, I'm going to go with Donatello just because I played him in the anniversary movie. I'm sticking with that. Yeah.
Favorite turtle. I'm gonna go with Donatello. I'm gonna go with Donatello. I mean, you know, when you play with the action figures, of course, you like all the guys with the fancy weapons like the sai and the nunchucks and everything, and the katana blade, because they just seem more effective. But using that bow effectively, it takes a great amount of skill. So that just shows how skillful he is, that he could really be just as effective as the other turtles, but not necessarily need a sharp object to do it. He just needs a long object that he uses with skill. Also, he's the brains of the bunch too. So So if fighting crime as a turtle doesn't work out for him, he can go do something else because he's got brains. He can find another career path.
My favorite turtle? I remember when I was a kid in elementary school, and I had a group of friends who we all pretended to be turtles, and I wasn't the most popular guy, so I didn't get first choice. I think everybody else got to be Leo and stuff, and I think I got stuck with Don, and by default now I have a special place in my heart for Donatello, because I feel like no one wants to be Donatello. He's just got the staff. Who cares about that? But I don't know. I've always had a place in my heart for him because of that, and maybe that's just my own personal insecurities coming through and being like, yeah, Donatello was cool. It's not the last choice. I wanted the bow staff, but I mean, let's be honest. Leo is the coolest. The swords are, you can't beat that. But I'll go with Donatello just because of my roots and my history.
Oh man. So okay. I would have to say, when I was a kid, and it's probably true today, I always liked the idea of like the quote unquote leader. I don't know if that's especially like, I don't remember whether like Leonardo's like designated the leader or he just accepts that mantle. But as a kid, I was a Leonardo guy. I'm gonna say Leonardo. I don't think that's changed. I love the weapons. I can recognize that probably the other ones are a little more fun. But Leonardo is going to be my go-to pick.
I don't. I love them all.
Oh, well, I'd have to say Mikey. I mean, I Mikey because of Mikey's attitude, because Mikey's the one, because I identify with Mikey. If I were a turtle, I would be Mikey. And also because he was voiced by my friend Wayne Grayson, whom I love. And he made that job, which was already a fun thing to do, he made it even more fun to do. So whenever I see Mikey, I always go, oh yeah. So I have a special soft spot in my heart for nunchucks.
No, actually, I like the Turtles as a group of brothers. Like I like this sort of the byplay of them. I especially liked them in the comic book because they were darker characters. I distinctly remember that first issue of the comic book saying that this is dedicated to the work of Jack Kirby, and so like you have this, and maybe it said Jack Kirby and Frank Miller. I can't remember. I think maybe it did, but it definitely had this kind of like darkness from the kinds of writing that were done by those masters of the form. So I did. I liked these guys in those early comic books. These characters sort of joked around, which is what was seized on by the films and the cartoons. But they also kind of did it in this kind of like deadly context, and which I guess is still there to a certain extent. So I just sort of like that about them in general. But no, I don't have. It's not that I don't. It's not that I like Donatello particularly better than Michelangelo. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, wow. This has been honestly one of the best experiences of my life. Being able to get all of you together to do this cast reunion, it puts a big smile on my face, and I won't lie, you honestly have made my childhood. Thank you so much for being able to come here today and do this. This is just amazing. And also just thank you for just creating an amazing show. This show, I feel as though I can speak on behalf of many people. It has made our childhood one of the best shows we'll ever get. And just thank you for creating such an amazing show.